Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, How to Avoid the Spam Folder. My name is Jill Bastian, and with me today is Savannah Stewart, and we're going to take you through some tips to help create an email and an email campaign that goes to your recipient's inbox rather than to the spam folder. Just a couple things before we jump into the webinar. First of all, this will probably be about 35, 40 minutes, and then at the end there will be time for Q&A as we do for all our webinars. So if you do think of questions along the way, go ahead and type those into the box that you see in your GoToWebinar window, and we'll be happy to answer as many of those as we can at the end of the webinar. One of the questions we get pretty much every time we do a webinar is this being recorded? And the answer is yes, we are recording the webinar. This will be put up on our help site next week. I usually put them up there about a week after. It'll be under the webinars tab, and you can see where all the recorded webinars are. So you'll be able to access this information. I'll also put the slides up there. If for some reason you don't want to listen to Savannah and I, and you just want to look at the slides, I'll have the slides available as well. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look at what we're going to do today. So first of all, we're going to go through what is spam and the CAN-SPAM laws. And you might be familiar with these, but I want to make sure everyone understands why these exist and why they're important. And then we're going to go through tips for your emails. And we're going to kind of start at the top, at the from label, and work our way through some of the things to avoid in your email to help get it into the inbox. As always, we have some resources for you, and then, of course, there will be time for Q&A. So, what is spam? Wikipedia has a definition of spam, and that is basically unsolicited bulk email, junk mail, or unsolicited commercial email, and is the practice of sending unwanted email messages, frequently with commercial content, in large quantities to an indiscriminate set of recipients. That's a working definition. Of course, we all know what spam is. We see it every day in our own inboxes or our own spam folders. It's usually emails for pharmaceuticals that we have no use or interest in. But most people have their own loose definition of spam. And generally, that's going to be any email that they didn't want or didn't sign up to receive. So this is kind of a human spam filter, if you will. If your recipient thinks that an email is spam, then to them it is spam, even if it doesn't fall into that definition of what spam is. Today we're also going to talk about some things that may seem like they don't immediately relate to your email going into a spam folder, but can over time impact inbox placement, which is really important as well. So not only are we going to cover the do's and don'ts of what to put in your email, but also some practices that you may or may not be doing that can also change where your email ends up as well. So these are specific things that are required or are banned by the CAN-SPAM law. The CAN-SPAM law was enacted in 2003 to try to control some of the spam that was coming into people's email inboxes. It doesn't really control it completely, and honestly, the CAN-SPAM law kind of makes it just a little more legal to do a little bit of spamming because, for example, you can use a purchase list. The CAN-SPAM law doesn't say anything about purchase lists, but we're going to talk about that a little bit later, how that is actually not a good practice. So CAN-SPAM bans false header information. Now, if you're mailing through vertical response, this is something we take care of, so you don't actually have to worry about this. But the domain name has to be accurate. And to that point, most ISPs actually check that the domain on your email matches the IP address that's sending it. So even ISPs go above and beyond what the CAN-SPAM law requires, that they're actually checking this information. You also can't have a deceptive subject line. Your subject line has to relate to the content of your email. And we talk about this a lot in a lot of our webinars. I do the Getting Started with Vertical Response demos twice a week, and I talk about this. It's something that's really important. I mean, not only is it against the law to have a subject line that just tricks people into opening it, But it's also annoying to your recipients if you're not actually giving them what they think they're going to be getting. So an example of this, you probably even have seen this, where you'll get an email that has a subject line that you're a winner, that you won some sweepstakes that you never entered, so that's obviously pretty deceptive. But also, one of my favorite examples, and if you've ever been to one of my webinars where I talk about this, you might have heard this, but a couple years ago, somebody was trying to send an email through our system, and the subject line said, free sushi, which definitely got my attention because I was like, free sushi? Who's giving away sushi? I like sushi. And when I looked at the email, it was actually something to do with working out or bodybuilding, and there was absolutely no sushi in the email, free or otherwise, and there was nothing free in the email either. So they were just trying to trick people with their subject line to look at that content of that email. I didn't let that email go out because that was against canned spam. But you do need to make sure that your subject line has something to do with your email. Also, you have to have a working opt-out method. Again, vertical response takes care of this for you, but just so you know what the law entails, you have to remove the address within 10 days. Vertical response does it within about an hour of somebody clicking on the link. And the opt-out method must be active for 30 days. You must have a valid postal address for the sender of the email. And that's for a couple reasons. One, it shows that you're an actual company and you're not something that's made up. And also, it's another way that people can unsubscribe. They can actually send a letter to your address and ask to be removed from your mailing list. The canned spam law says that you can't harvest email addresses. Again, vertical response doesn't allow these types of addresses to be mailed through our system. But just so you know, that isn't something that you can use when you're sending out your emails. And of course, there are fines that can be enacted if you are breaking the canned spam law. It's $11,000 plus any other fees that the FTC feels like they want to impose. And generally speaking, they find a lot of fines to impose. If you do any search online to see people or companies who have been fined for breaking canned spam laws, they have a tendency to go up into the hundreds of thousands of dollars for fines. So it is definitely something you want to keep in mind. Again, vertical response does everything we can to make sure your emails are within the law. So hopefully none of this is anything you really need to worry about.
Right, so kind of going along with that, in addition to the rules from the canned spam, VR also has rules about lists and content that can be mailed out through your system. So some of vertical response anti-spam policies are you cannot have a purchased, rented, harvested, or otherwise third-party mailing list. So all of your lists need to be opted in, or your recipients at least need to know who you are and kind of what they signed up for. So our clients can only mail to people who have specifically requested information from or about their company. And kind of going along with this, a good example of the way that you received your recipients would be through an opt-in form on your website, where customers sign up at a trade show booth or request email over the phone. An example of a bad or questionable method for growing your list would be a contact us form on your website, maybe like a trade show attendee list, a list provided by an affiliate or partner, or of course a purchased, rented, or borrowed list.
The reason the contact us form is a bad way is that contact us usually means somebody's asking a specific question of your company about a service or a product or something that you're offering. And generally, contact us forms don't say, add me to your mailing list. And that's the thing that you need to make sure people are aware that they're being added to your mailing list, which is why contact us forms are usually a bad way to do it, because people don't realize they're being added to your list.
Right, it's just a bit deceiving.
Yes. So we're going to jump into the different pieces of the email and cover some of the things that you need to keep in mind to help keep your email going to the inbox. So of course, the canned spam law says that the from label has to be the sender of the email. So you want your from line to be accurate. Generally speaking, this should be your company name. Your recipients are going to recognize your company name quicker than they would actually recognize a person's name, unless your CEO happens to be incredibly famous. Most people aren't going to know who the CEO is of your company, but they'll know your company name pretty quickly. Also, that's usually who they've signed up with. They usually are at your company website, and that's where they're signing up to get your emails. So that's why you want to have your from label be your company name. You also want to try to get your recipients to add your from address into the address book in their email program that they're using. This is called whitelisting. Generally speaking, if you have an address in an address book, most email programs will recognize it as a good sender, and they'll put it in the inbox. I actually have some information on our help site on how people can add addresses to the whitelist of their email program. Some email programs, you actually have to click on a link or a button that says, this is a safe sender. Putting it in the address book isn't the only thing that you have to do. But for the most part, doing that will help get the email into an inbox. You want to also avoid changing the from field name that you use. So if it's your company name, keep it as your company name and don't change it. And that's for a couple of reasons. One, that's your recipients start getting an email from that from address, and that's what they start expecting it to be. And so they'll open it because they know what it is. If you change your from label, they're not going to know who's sending it, and so you could see your open rate drop. Also, if you did manage to get your email address into their address book, if you change it, that's going to change the address in the address book, and so again, you could see your inbox placement drop. The last one is kind of a tip if you're not using vertical response. Try not to use things like no reply at or some random from address. It makes it hard for your recipients to know who's sending the email.
And in your subject line, here are some things that you don't want to do in order to avoid having your email marked as spam. So avoid spam techniques in the subject line, free in all caps, or free with asterisks in between. You don't want to abuse punctuation and no excessive capitalization. The word free has gotten a bad rap, and the word in the subject line alone won't send your email to the spam filter, but it definitely could contribute to it. These examples are of like all caps, or the ever popular spammer trick of breaking up a bad word with asterisks to hide it from spam filters. Spam filters know this trick, so you want to avoid doing that at all costs.
Free is just a short word to use here as an example, but I know somebody's probably typing right now, I get emails all the time with free in the subject line, and that's true. Right. I do too, especially at the holidays when free shipping is the most popular subject line out there. They come straight to my inbox. So free all by itself isn't going to put your email in a spam folder, but if there are some other things wrong with your email as we go through some of these things, free can contribute to it. So you need to make sure if you're going to use free in the subject line that the rest of your email is clean of other issues.
Right. Also, don't use re or forward in the subject line to suggest an ongoing communication with the sender. This is against the VR policy, but it also could cause your email to be marked as spam by your recipient. And also, we want our subject lines to be relevant. We don't want to trick our recipients into opening our emails. It just doesn't create a good relationship between yourself and your recipients, but also, in addition to that, will most likely be marked as spam. And avoid dirty words in the subject line and body of the email. Pharmaceuticals. We all kind of know these types of words from when we get spam. So words like pornography and work from home will definitely could have you flagged. And we'll go over some more of these dirty words in a few slides so you can get an idea of exactly what we're talking about.
We're not talking about dirty words, the 7 words you can't say on TV.
Right.
These are words that could cause an issue with delivery. That's why they're dirty.
Some of them are actually dirty, but
well, yeah, but we're not going to mention those.
We won't get into those. All right, so for the content of your email, you'll want to know where your links go and always link to reputable sites. Most of the time we're linking back to our website or maybe, some sort of one of the pages on our website. So unless your website is spam, that's usually, or is a non-reputable site, it's usually a good thing to do. But you do need to use links in your emails, of course, but don't go overboard as well. Just like use a balance of text and images as well. You'll also need to use a balance of links with your email.
And really, you just want to make sure if you're linking not to your website, as Savannah said, we assume your website's great, but if you're linking to a third-party website, you need to know that that is a reputable site, because links can flag your email as spam. Specific email programs will look at links, and if it's going to a certain domain, you could have your email marked as spam. So that's why you need to know that what you're linking to is a good website.
And also, you always want to have a text backup of your HTML email. In addition to that, specific attention needs to be paid to how the content is assembled. So the number one cause of content-related filtering has to do with the balance of HTML to text in an email. So both too much HTML or too little can increase the chances of filtering. So when building content, just be sure to use real text rather than an image of text to help you build a healthy balance. This is why creating a text version of your email is so important, in that it helps build that balance.
Also, when Savannah said having too much or too little HTML, one of the things that can also cause an issue with delivering your email is, for example, if you're using our free form and you're not putting HTML code in there, you're just writing text, or if you're using the Canvas tool and you're not putting images in there, you're just writing text, it's not what's expected by the by the ISPs. So you have a text email that has no images, but you put it in HTML content, that's a flag, because that could be a spamming issue. It could be a spammer's trick. So if you're creating a plain text email, use the plain text editor. Don't use the Canvas tool to create a plain text email, because that could cause delivery issues. Again, it's something ISPs are looking at. You should actually have HTML in there. You want links, you want images, if it's an HTML email. If it's just a plain text email, put it in the plain text editor.
Right. And then also, make sure your email is a good balance of text and images. Single image emails can often go to spam, so you kind of want to avoid creating those types of emails, because they are typically marked as spam, and we've kind of seen those before in our inbox too, the big bright images where if you click once you go to some crazy site. So
you click on those? I never click on those.
I've learned my lesson, but definitely have in the past. And host your images with a good, credible service. We obviously host images, and we're a good, credible service. But if you do decide to host your images with someone else, you want to make sure that that's a credible service. And no deers. That's why we have our nice
our
image.
no deer image.
We're proud of that image. But yeah, the use of the deer salutation is something that's done often by spam senders. So you want to avoid that.
What I like to call the Nigerian money laundering scams. I'm sure you've all seen the emails where somebody says, "Dear my friend," or just "dear," or something like that, and then they say, you know, if you send them $10,000, they'll send you $2 million or whatever that deal is. But it always starts with "dear," and that's why the dear salutation has become a part of a problem with delivering emails. If you get the VR Buzz newsletter, and if you have for a couple of years, you'll notice we switched from having "dear" in our salutation to "hi," and that's because this can be an issue.
Right. Spam assassin.
Spam Assassin filters on this specifically, so anyone who's using Spam Assassin, this could be an issue for as well. So if your recipients are using that particular filter, you could run into an issue with this. So you want to think about switching. If you're using "dear" in your salutation, either switch to something like "hi" or "hello," or think about not using a salutation. I mean, generally for a B2B email or even B2C email, you don't necessarily need that type of a salutation in your email, and especially if it's going to cause your email to go into spam folder.
Right. And the use of hi or hello also sounds a little bit more casual, and I think it's received better by recipients as well. And then you also want to send what is expected. So establish what you'll be included in your emails at sign up, and then stick to it. If your recipients start marking your email as spam, you'll definitely start having issues getting into the inbox. And when you start sending multiple messages per day or per week, or you're sending things that your recipients didn't didn't expect when they signed up to receive your emails, you're going to increase your chances of being marked as spam.
And this is something that we talk about quite a bit if you're building your mailing list, is that using an opt-in form is a great way to grow your list. You just want to make sure people have have expectations set at the beginning of what they're going to get, which helps encourage people to sign up. So if you say, we're going to mail once a week, and this is the information we're going to mail, then you need to stick to that. If you're going to change any of that, you need to let your recipients know ahead of time. And we're going to talk about frequency in a little bit. But if people are signing up to learn about your web-based business that you have, don't start sending them emails about puppies if that isn't what they originally signed up for. I know that's kind of a silly example, but you don't want to switch what the content is without letting your recipients know ahead of time, because that can start getting your emails marked as spam.
And here are the words that we were talking about earlier, the words to avoid in your content. So this is just a sampling. There are many more words you can locate online. Most spam filters don't filter on these words alone, but again, these going along with other issues can lead to the spam filter. So if you have this in conjunction with too many links and some of those other things that we mentioned, it'll promote you being promoted, saying that you're spam. So these are words to avoid in your subject line and email content that can get you caught in the spam filters. And most of these are common sense. The word work from home, so I'll just quickly go through words that can relate to sex or pornography, words that relate to cures or medication, Xanax, Valium, Cialis, Viagra, apply now, Oprah.
Sadly. Well, and the reason Oprah is especially bad in the subject line is that a lot of spammers will put something like as seen on Oprah, and
Right.
that it's something definitely not seen on Oprah. But because she has such a big presence in the world of
Right.
just about anything, using Oprah was a good way for spammers, at least for a while, to get people to open their emails. And so that is unfortunate, but her name in the subject line can cause an issue.
Call now, check out, compare, credit, herbal. We all know the herbal trick. Instant, loans, offer, opportunity, winner. So a lot of these words are just kind of, they sound too good to be true. That's one thing you can kind of think of. Lose weight, casino, work from home, cash, and of course the all caps free.
And just to reiterate what Savannah said, just these words alone in your subject line, for example, won't put your email specifically in a spam folder, but it can certainly contribute. So if you are running a casino, you can use that word. You just need to make sure that you have a good balance of everything else in your email to make sure that doesn't cause an issue with delivery.
And in the design of your email, here's some things you do or don't want to do when designing your email to avoid spam. So you don't want to go crazy with the email size. 40 to 45K is a good size for your email. Any larger than that, by having like crazy images or things like that, you might be blocked by the recipient's inbox.
And if you're using our freeform option, this is the default size that we have. And part of the reason that this could be an issue is if people are writing their email in Word and then pasting that code into their email, whoever they're using, email service provider. Word doesn't use all HTML, and that not all HTML in the HTML portion can cause delivery issues because it's not HTML, and ISPs are looking at this kind of stuff. So if you're creating your email in Word, you just need to make sure that you're only copying the text, that you're not copying the code. The code makes it really difficult to work with for people who know HTML because it's not all HTML, and it can make it difficult to get into the inbox as well.
And then balance your image to text ratio. So we recommend 70-30 or 80-20. So 80% text, 20% images or 70% text, 30% images. And that kind of helps with going along with email size as well if you are not using one of our editors. Host your images through an established service. We kind of went through this earlier, and again, we allow you to host your images through us, but if you're using someone else, you want to make sure that they're established. Use alt text behind your images.
And that's what the screenshot is right here at the bottom is alt text. So as you probably know, most email programs block images until the recipient clicks a link or something to display them. And basically what alt text does is give additional information about what's going on in the email if the image is being blocked. In this example, all the text that you see is alt text. So if you have, especially if you have a lot of images in your emails, make sure you're adding alt text so that there's more information given to your recipients, as well as it makes it look like it's a more legitimate email to spam filters, because this isn't something spammers actually care about.
Right. And avoid lots of colored text. This kind of is one of those things that can be common sense. So when you're designing your email, if it looks like spam with crazy colors and highlighting and all caps, then you kind of know that other people are going to think it's spam too, and the spam filters will as well. So, and also be careful of using third-party links. AOL, Hotmail, Juno, NetZero, the CloudMark filter all have been known to block based on the reputation of the links within the body of your email.
So HTML, if you're using our template, so if you're using the wizard, if you're using the canvas and you're not doing anything to the template code, you don't need to worry about this. But if a lot of the people using our system use our freeform option where they create their own HTML to use. So again, as I mentioned earlier, ISPs actually are looking at the HTML that you're creating, and bad HTML can filter your email into the spam folder pretty quickly. So you want to make sure that your HTML is clean. You want to make sure any tags that you have, that you close them. So unclosed tags can cause issues with your HTML. You want to use the HTML and body tags to open, and then also make sure you close those tags, because you want to close all tags. You also just want to make sure that your tags are nested correctly. So I have an example in here where I open a paragraph, and then I bold some words, and then I have the paragraph tag first that's closed, and then closing the bold tag. So just make sure that your tags are nested correctly for your HTML. And of course, I don't expect everyone on the webinar to even have the faintest idea of what I'm talking about now. But some people will know what I'm talking about. So it's important that you follow these things. Another thing that is a good idea is to validate your HTML before you start mailing it out, and there's plenty of them online. This is one I have here, is validator.w3.org, and you can paste in your HTML code and it'll let you know what might be wrong with it. Again, it'll tell you things like if your tags are nested incorrectly or if things aren't closed. It's very useful. I find it a useful thing. I don't write a lot of HTML code, but when I do, I frequently will use the validator just to make sure I've done everything right. It's free, so I would suggest you do that if you are writing your own code. Also, in our resources slide, we have a guide if you're creating emails on HTML, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So we've pretty much covered the actual content of the email, but some more things that cause issues with getting your email into the inbox are lists and frequency, and those are our next two slides. So using a purchase list, which goes against vertical response policy, as well as pretty much all of our competitors, purchase lists are really a time bomb, and it's just something that's going to cause an issue with your sending reputation, whether you're using vertical response or mailing it through your own system. Purchase lists can have all kinds of hidden addresses that can cause problems. Spam traps or honeypot addresses are frequently found in purchase lists, and those are email addresses that are valid but never used. And if they receive an email, that means the address was scraped off of a website and sold, because they're not used to sign up for anything. And so the owners of those addresses know, and they will contact whoever mailed it, and then they're in big trouble. Also, ISPs like Yahoo or Hotmail that have email programs will also frequently have addresses that have expired where people aren't using the accounts anymore, and they just leave them. And if they start getting mail, then again, they know that somebody is using purchase lists, and that can cause a delivery issue as well. So no purchase lists. I know it seems like an easy way to grow your list, but first of all, it's easy to get your reputation tarnished if you're mailing to a purchase list, because all you have to do is hit one or two of those bad addresses and you're done. Um, it could go just to a spam folder and you don't get caught, but also it's not a good way to start the relationship with someone who you want to start using your products or your system. So purchase lists are not a good way to get started. Yes, growing your mailing list is not necessarily an easy thing to do, but a purchase list is definitely not going to make it any easier. Of course, you have to have a clear unsubscribe. As I mentioned before, and CAN-SPAM requires this. Vertical response handles this all for you, but you want to make sure that your unsubscribe message is not obscured in any way. If you're creating HTML, sometimes if your tag for your background color doesn't close, then you can't see the unsubscribe information in the footer. And since it's required by law, we won't let you send your email out if that's obscured. So make sure that all of that works out well. You also want to just keep an eye on your unsubscribes, because that is a good indication whether your recipients are enjoying what you're sending them or not. If you're not sticking to what you said about frequency or content, it's possible people will start unsubscribing. So that's a clear message to you. But also, people are lazy, and clicking the unsubscribe link can be hard for them. It's effort. Also, back in the early days of the email and the internet, clicking unsubscribe on bad emails caused a lot more problems than actually unsubscribing. I don't think it's as big a deal anymore. Most of the time, if you click unsubscribe, it's actually from legitimate emails, and that's not an issue. But sometimes people are afraid to click the unsubscribe link, so what they click instead is the "this is spam" button. And that can cause problems, especially if you're mailing on a pretty regular basis and people start clicking the spam, "this is spam" button, your email can start going to the spam folder rather than the inbox. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have done any of the things that we said you shouldn't, other than maybe change your frequency or your content. But if people start marking your email as spam, it can start going into the spam folder. So that's why it's really important that you do some best practices for your email marketing, in that you stick to the things that you tell your recipients so that they will still be engaged in your email. Using the add to address book is a great way to help keep your email going into the inbox. And as I said, there is information on our help site to help people do that. Also, sending targeted emails with your list can help keep your email going to the inbox. So we do have a segmentation tool which can allow you to break your list up based on anything, but one of the things you can use your segmentation tool to do is create lists of the non-responders, so the people who haven't been tracked as opening or clicking on links. And you can try sending them an email that might have a different subject line and see if you can get them to be more engaged. Or you can use the segmentation tool to send specific information to people. The example I always use is, if you're a winery, you can have a segment of people who like Chardonnay, and then you can send them an email about your new Chardonnay that's been released, or some special thing that you're doing. If you're sending something that your recipients are specifically interested in, they're more likely to be engaged in your email. So they're going to open it, they're going to click on the links, they'll go to your website and do stuff. And people being engaged in your email helps keep it going to the inbox. So it's important to think about segmenting. And again, we have some resources on this. And then, testing. Again, using the segmentation tool, you can break your list up and do testing, and you can see if people are engaged or not in some of the things that you're sending to them, so that you can continue to send relevant information to your recipients so they continue to want to get your emails. And that helps with inbox placement as well. So I have mentioned, it's your turn.
It's my turn, yay! So when it comes to how frequently you are sending your emails, it's really about balance. You want to send often enough to where your recipients don't forget who you are and forget signing up for your emails. And you also don't want to send so often that your recipients think you're spam, or they just
they get tired of you.
They get tired of your emails and they don't appreciate the content that you're sending anymore. So set up a mailing frequency at sign up and stick to it. You'll also want to mail at least once per month. Going along, that's kind of referencing the point that you want to send often enough to where your recipients don't actually forget signing up. It's a good idea to have a welcome email. Just kind of, it's a good way to develop a relationship with your recipients and thank them for agreeing to receive your emails from your company. And then a lot of people send more frequently during the holidays or kind of change up their frequency. So you can, if you are planning on sending more frequently at any set time for a holiday or maybe the busy season for your business, it's a good idea to alert your recipients to any of those changes.
That way they won't unsubscribe or click this as spam.
Right.
If all of a sudden you usually mail once a month and all of a sudden you're mailing weekly, that type of change can annoy people, especially during the holidays when there's like a bazillion emails that are coming in at once. If they don't know you're changing your mailing, then that can cause a problem. I spoke in January at a company, and we were talking about email marketing, and somebody asked me a question. They said, I had a lot of people unsubscribe in December, and I don't know how I can prevent it. And of course, nobody wants unsubscribed. So she was like, I kind of want them back. And I said, well, did you change your frequency for the holidays? And she said, yes, I did. And I said, did you tell them you were going to change your frequency? And she said, no. And I was like, I think that's what happened, is that you sent too much and they weren't expecting it, and people just unsubscribe because they get tired of it. So just let people know, if they're reading your email, then letting them know at the beginning of your email before you jump in that, over the next month, you're going to send a few more. It's good to establish that length of time that this change is going to be so that they know when to expect everything to go back to normal. So then, again, they're not going to be wanting to unsubscribe.
Right, and they know it's not a general practice for your business to constantly send multiple emails per month, for example. So we kind of talked about when you don't send frequent enough, subscribers could fail to recognize the from field, and they may delete your message, or even worse, they may mark it as spam. And there are lots of good reasons for maintaining a steady flow of communication rather than relying on infrequent or massive blasts. So, of course, we don't want to not send for a period of time and then send a bunch of email blasts at one time.
So this is a slide from our delivery director, Kirsty, that I used for the end of this webinar. These are some common pitfalls, and this is not any of the content things that we talked about earlier. This is all about your mailing frequency and your lists. So mailing to an old list can be a big problem, and it is a big common cause for seeing your delivery drop. Because if you don't know this, most email addresses expire in about 6 months to a year. So they have a pretty short life. And there's a variety of reasons for that, but email addresses go stale pretty quickly. Generally speaking, you're going to lose up to a third of your list due to attrition in a year, which means building your mailing list is an ongoing process, or should be. So this is why mailing to an old list, if you have a list that's a couple years old that you haven't been mailing to on a regular basis, you will have a lot of bounces, a lot of unsubscribes, and a whole bunch of non-responders. And you could see a lot of them just go into the spam folder because these are things that may or may not even be legitimate addresses anymore. Not asking permission or assuming permission means forever, and that last part kind of goes with the first one. Just because someone gave you their email address 5 years ago does not mean, especially if you haven't been mailing to them, doesn't mean that the permission still exists. Generally, for vertical response, if your list is older than a year and you haven't mailed to it, that's too old. And the reason is because addresses go bad. Plus, if you haven't mailed to someone in a year, they're not going to remember signing up to get your email. So even if the address is still legitimate, sending to them could cause them to mark your email as spam because they may not remember signing up. Even if they did, that doesn't mean that they remember. I mean, think about your own inbox activities, right? I mean, if you signed up to get an email from someone even 6 months ago and you haven't heard from them, would you remember? I wouldn't. I mean, I'm pretty sure of the things that I sign up for because this is my job, so I know what I've signed up for. But so you don't want to assume things about your list. And that's why a welcome message is important. If people have signed up recently on your list, send them a welcome message just to remind them, hey, you did sign up. This is the information we're going to be sending. That helps get more info to your recipient to start expecting from you, as well as keeping your list fresh. Always test your emails. And one of the things you can do is set up some free accounts online and test mailing to like Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail, AOL, they have an online one. And see how your email looks in those different email programs that you're using. Just make sure everything looks good. So testing is really important. We do ask you to test your emails before you launch them in our system. Doesn't mean that we know you're looking at them, but we hope you are. But testing is important. And then also just make sure you're following good list hygiene. So make sure everyone on your list has given you permission in some way to mail to them. And if people aren't responding to your email, send a special email to your non-responders and see if you can re-engage them. But you might want to think about taking them out of your list, which may or may not be a good thing for you to do, but it's something to keep in mind that if people aren't reading your email, that can cause delivery issues at some point. And so here are some resources. Now, we have lots of resources available, but first of all, a help site is there to help you create your email. So there's text tutorials and videos. Also, the information about the Safe Sender information is on the help site. So if you go and just search for Safe Sender, it'll come up and you can see how to get people to put your from address into pretty much any email program out there. Our blog has all kinds of information about list building. There's one here in particular, but if you go to blog.verticalresponse.com and click or just scroll over to the right-hand side, you'll see some of the different categories, and list building is in there. We also have some recorded webinars on building your mailing list, as well as a guide. So on our guides page, we do have 50 ways to grow your list. Again, growing your mailing list is something that's going to be an ongoing process, but it will be pretty rewarding when you get people who are interested and engaged in your company. I also said there is a guide on HTML tips for designing your email. So if you are creating your own HTML, these are some things to keep in mind so that your email works and also doesn't go to the spam folder. And then there's some information on design your email for delivery and response on our guides page as well.